Good evening. For 27 years, 6 months and 6 days, he had been a prisoner. During that time, he became a legend, a symbol of black resistance to apartheid, and to many, he became a martyr. Tonight, he is a free man. Nelson Mandela, the leader of the African National Congress, he walked out of a prison on a gloriously sunny South African afternoon, and there is general agreement that his freedom begins a new era in South Africa. This is a special edition of Sunday Report. We're taking the time usually filled by Venture to bring you comprehensive coverage of a truly extraordinary day, a day so many have waited for so long, the day Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. We start with the CBC's Jean-Francois Lepine.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
Nelson Mandela emerged from his long nightmare as a simple man walking his way to freedom accompanied by his wife Winnie. But his release meant probably more to the whole world than to the man himself. In an unprecedented move, state-controlled television beamed Mandela's release live into the homes of millions of South Africans. Outside, crowds of supporters had waited hours for that very first glimpse of the man that most of them had never even seen before. Mandela was then driven to a huge rally that had been building up since early morning to welcome him. More than 250,000 people came here in the center of Cape Town, hoping to hear Mandela's first public address. At one point, the crowd was so dense and the security so inadequate that Mandela's motorcade couldn't make its way through. Organizers spent hours trying to control the situation, but it only led to further unrest. As groups of people began to leave the rally, riots and looting broke out in the streets, and South African police forces reacted in panic, shooting almost indiscriminately. Dozens of people were wounded. Journalists were also hit. As the violence went on, Nelson Mandela finally showed up at the rally.
I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy and freedom for all.
Obviously aware of what was going on outside in the streets, Mandela delivered a bold and defying speech, clearly showing that his determination had not been softened by all those years in prison.
The factors which necessitated the armed struggle still exist today. We have no option but to continue.
But Mandela said that only negotiations could avoid the need for armed struggle. But he added that the black majority would not negotiate unless it is given full political rights.
We call on the international community to continue the campaign to isolate the apartheid regime, to lift sanctions now would be to run the risk of aborting the process towards the complete eradication of apartheid.
Mandela then called on the white minority to join what he said was the South African majority's recognition that apartheid had no future.
Universal suffrage on a common voters' roll in a united, democratic and non-racial South Africa is the only way to peace and racial harmony.
Mandela played down his role as a leader. He said a leader had to be elected, but the people at this rally clearly expect a leading role from the man who has been their guide for so long. Jean-Francois Lepine, CBC News, Cape Town.
The South African government released more than a man today. It also released emotions that had been pent up inside so many South Africans. There's probably never been a day in the history of that country when so many people, black and white, were happy about the same thing. Here's Tony Weaver.
It was a day of jubilation and euphoria as tens of thousands of supporters of the African National Congress, legal for only 9 days, welcomed their leader. Many in the crowds were not even born when Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment 27 years ago. Their leader, their symbol of hope, has returned.
I tell you, the feeling, the thrill of just realizing that he's going to be out.
I feel free today.
It's going to change the country a lot.
In what way?
By freedom of speech and equal rights.
Jubilant South Africans, black and white, streamed to the Victor Verster prison. White South Africans, especially young whites, have grown up being told that Mandela is a terrorist, the enemy. Now he is being called the hope and the future of South Africa.
At last we've got a chance for peace.
I feel that it is his right, it is just justice that he is free today.
I think it's fantastic. Great news for South Africa.
For Nelson Mandela, today were the first steps on what he once called no easy walk to freedom. For South Africa, those few steps have altered the course of history and set the country on a path of change, which many say cannot be reversed. Tony Weaver for CBC News, Cape Town.
The Journal's Barbara Frum is in Soweto tonight. She witnessed some of the remarkable scenes of celebration you just saw in Tony Weaver's report. She's in South Africa talking to people who live in the township about their hopes for the future, and you'll see the stories she's been working on in the days ahead on the Journal. Earlier tonight, we reached Barbara near Nelson Mandela's house in Soweto, where a large crowd awaits his expected arrival tomorrow morning. Barbara, you spent most of the day and the night in Soweto near the Mandela home. What's it been like?
Peter, I think this is the biggest block party in the history of the world. I've never been in a place where you felt so calm, so happy, a kind of peaceful joy, people dancing and chanting. If the government was under any question about who Mandela was and who he led, these people are speaking with one voice, chanting his slogans, calling his name, walking by his house. They can't wait till he returns to them.
Barbara, tell us about that moment when Mandela was released. I understand you were watching it in a Soweto family's home, South African television coverage. What was that like?
We visited with a family that is a neighbor of 6 doors away. I was amazed how quiet they were when they watched him walk out of that prison gate. There was beaming smiles, such joy and pride, but especially pride in what a fine figure he cut. Very intent on knowing what he projected and how he would be received by others, not just by them. He's a hero, and they whisper, hero, hero, and the crowd in this street party, was yelling in the street, Viva Mandela. And suddenly these people I was with said, and Viva de Klerk, because he untied the knot. He's a brave man, eh? I was shocked. I was taken aback completely at the broad-mindedness of the people here.
Tell us about the kind of things they're saying, I guess on the expectation level. You know, what do they want to hear from Mandela when he comes home?
The first thing they say is, I want to be with him, which is something stronger than I want to see him. Be with him is to show him solidarity with him, but also to experience the reality of him. These are people who've been told about Mandela since they were children. Many of them are in their 30s and 40s and have no sense of the reality of the man. And the fact that he wants to come home to this particular house, because Winnie Mandela has built other and grander houses, but this is the house that was his at the time of his arrest. The fact that he wants to come and sleep his first night in this house means everything to them. It means he's still a man of tradition, a man who knows his roots, knows his origins, and believes with them that he is an ordinary man.
Barbara, thanks for this. It really must be, it must be quite something to be there.
It's a privilege. It's a joy and a privilege to be in an event that I guess, well, we've had it here, but it's continuing. It's continuing.
All right, Barbara, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now that Nelson Mandela is a free man, the world community is taking a fresh look at South Africa, and one question seems sure to get a lot of attention in the months ahead. That's the question of sanctions and whether they should be lifted. Mandela today left no doubt about his own position. Sanctions, he said, must be maintained. And as Anna Maria Tremonti reports, Canada plans to do just that.
Or the week after, I don't know.
The Canadian government was delighted with Nelson Mandela's release.
It's a little like the crumbling of the Berlin Wall.
But External Affairs Minister Joe Clark said Mandela's freedom still isn't enough to convince Canada to lift economic sanctions.
There are some things that would be clearly necessary, and they would be the removal from the statute books of laws that give effect to the apartheid system. That is the only system in the world that writes racial discrimination into the Constitution.
In Washington, U.S. President George Bush, who telephoned Mandela, said it's too early for him to decide what to do about sanctions.
That did not come up. I will address that at appropriate time. There's no time frame. I will be discussing that with our top advisors, and look forward to having more to say about that later on.
Prime Minister Mulroney sent a letter to Mandela. In it, he said Canada shares the commitment to the peaceful dismantling of apartheid and the creation of a non-racial democracy in South Africa. We stand ready, Mulroney continued, to assist whenever and however needed. But although South Africa's ambassador to Canada said earlier this weekend that Canada may be able to play a role in shaping a new South Africa, tonight Henny de Klerk was less encouraging.
We must find African solutions to our problems. So an African mediator might be more feasible than somebody from Western Europe or Northern America.
De Klerk is disappointed Canada is not ready to lift sanctions, but the Mulroney government believes sanctions helped push South Africa toward change. And until that process is firmly established, the government says Canada must keep up the pressure. Anna Maria Tremonti, CBC News, Ottawa.
And later in this broadcast, a feature interview with Prime Minister Mulroney, his views on today's developments in South Africa. Britain has never liked the idea of sanctions, and today British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher called once again for the rest of the world to ease the pressure. Claude Adams has more on that and the reaction of those Britons who do not agree with their Prime Minister.
Britain's anti-apartheid movement is among the most active in the world, and today it hosted a jubilant rally of thousands outside the South African embassy in London. The singing and dancing persisted even when Mandela's release was delayed for more than an hour. Then, when word finally came, they sang the ANC anthem. But activists insist there is much more to be done.
Most happiest moment of our lives. We've been waiting for it for 27 years. And we think Nelson's release now puts on the agenda the whole question of a new democratic South Africa.
If we could just put that extra pressure, we'd get the negotiating process underway and we'd get rid of apartheid in months, not in years.
Mandela's release has also set off a political debate over the future of sanctions. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher has never favored them. Today, she urged the West to relax sanctions.
It seems quite absurd to still use sticks to beat them with, however small those sticks may be.
Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock said that would be far too generous.
Then the apartheid regime would have won a great prize for making the smallest change.
That's a view shared by most critics of apartheid in Africa and elsewhere, who feel now is the time to continue, not end, the pressure.
Those first things which has done are good enough to enable the entire responsible leadership to sit down and talk, even if it means talking about talks.
Today's London rally was the high point of a round-the-clock vigil outside South Africa's embassy that's lasted 4 years. Organizers say that vigil will continue tomorrow and every day after that until apartheid is dismantled. Claude Adams, CBC News, London.
Mandela's freedom is more than a personal triumph, it's the triumph of an entire nation. And that nation is not confined to South Africa itself. His release has sent an emotional charge through South Africans everywhere. There are 50,000 of them here in Canada, and as Gillian Findlay reports, they were as moved by today's events as their compatriots half a world away.
The release of Nelson Mandela. In living rooms across the country this morning, South Africans and their supporters waited patiently, waited for their first glimpse of Nelson Mandela. They are members of the African National Congress, people who left South Africa or were forced to leave. Like Mandela, their work against apartheid landed several of them in jail. His release, they say, is proof the struggle is won.
This is the first real victory that our people are experiencing. Believe you me, words just fail me. It's an absolutely fantastic day.
From Regina, where there are only a handful of South Africans, to Vancouver, where there are hundreds, people celebrated. The biggest party, though, was in Toronto, where the mayor offered a special commemoration.
I am pleased on behalf of the people of Toronto to proclaim this day, February 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela Day in Toronto.
Their leader may be free, but these people know South Africa is still far from it. And so, amid the celebrations tonight, there was also a determination to carry on the fight.
Unfortunately, 30 years, in excess of 30 years has been wasted. But we're going to get it there, one way or the other. All roads lead to freedom.
And tonight, they say, thanks to Nelson Mandela, those roads seem a little bit easier. Gillian Findlay, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, back to the big story of the day, the release of Nelson Mandela. We've already shown you the highlights of his day, including parts of the speech he made in Cape Town. That was no ordinary speech. It seemed carefully crafted to give something to everyone. For those looking for the fighting Nelson Mandela, there he was. For those looking for the peacemaking Nelson Mandela, there he was too. But mostly there was the defiant Nelson Mandela, a man determined to show that his years in prison had not dulled his principles. The first word he spoke was also the last word he spoke before he went to prison, the black nationalist slogan, power.
Amandla! Amandla! In Africa, I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant. The apartheid destruction on our subcontinent is incalculable. The fabric of family life of millions of my people has been shattered. Millions are homeless and unemployed. Our economy lies in ruins, and our people are embroiled in political strife. I reiterate our call for, inter alia, the immediate ending of the state of emergency and the freeing of all and not only some political prisoners. There must be an end to white monopoly on political power. And a fundamental restructuring of our political and economic systems to ensure that the inequalities of apartheid are addressed and our society thoroughly democratized. We have waited too long for our freedom. We can no longer wait. Now is the time to intensify the struggle on all fronts. To relax our efforts now would be a mistake which generations to come will not be able to forgive.